At the very beginning of the story, a vast sky surrounded by dragons, flying beasts in the sky. Lava's river flowing on ground, a demon castle whose wall is broken. We saw 5 adventurers are venturing in demon realm. That is the hero and his 4 companions set off for the demon kingdom of Helmets, to subdue the demon king. They had killed 3 out of the 5 demon lords and there are only 2 demon lords left, on the way were the 2 demon lords. They continue to defeat the subordinate demons they encountered along the way. In addition to their incredible strength, a handsome warrior swing his mana sword. With a powerful blast all demon are vanished, he introduced as the Great Vermouth. Meanwhile, the 4 colleagues who helped Vermouth throughout his journey, a lady with a magic staff, she is happy about that she can use her full magic power, she blasts the demons on her way. She introduced as the Ytmanhwa, a mage. Beside her a beautiful lady praying in the middle of the battle and give blessing to teammates. Suddenly a demon attacks her from behind, she swiftly beheaded him. She introduced as the faithful Anis, a healer, a big muscle man approaching with the axe. With one swing of axe he killed most of demons on his way. He was called the brave Moran, a warrior and the last companion, who was beside Moran. He jumps towards demons, with a powerful swing of sword, he cuts demon into pieces. He introduced as the foolish Hamel, who was always competing with Vermouth, that he willing to surpass him. Hamel regards Vermouth as his rival but no one admits this. Then after they slaughtered all the crooks they are standing in Avenger pose, they relaxed. Then an attack headed towards Vermouth. Hamel realized that, he shouted for Vermouth and shielded him, tried to protect him with his body, but the attack hit right in the middle of Hamel's chest, which immediately made a hole in it. Hamel coughed up blood, then fell to the ground. The attacker, who was none other than the demon, laughed at that. He tried to launch another attack. He upheld his hand again, but Vermouth quickly noticed and immediately attacked the demon before it managed to launch its next attack. With the power of the sword that Vermouth succeeded in slashing the demon's body into 2 parts, the 3 colleagues, who realized that Hamel's body was seriously injured, immediately ran toward Hamel with feelings of fear and sadness. They surrounded Hamel's body that was lying on the floor. Then Vermouth said that there was no benefit of Hamel died like that. Hamel replied that according to him death was quite noble. For the rest of his life Hamel regretted not being more honest with his colleagues. He raised his shaking hand and asked Vermouth that you must defeat the demon kings. Vermouth held Hamel's dying hand and said that he swore in the named as a hero that he would defeat all demon lords. Hearing that he asked Anis to pray for him. He told Moran that he was a brave warrior more than anyone else. Hamel was going to say something to Senya, a kick on his face reveals that it was a storybook and a boy is shouting that I wouldn't say such a thing. I never liked them at all. He is very upset reading that if he finds the original author, he will beat him his ass. Why the others were given a good title in the book, while he was referred to as the fool. He assumed that it seemed like the book was written by someone he beat 300 years ago before his death. The boy says they let that writer write such a book. Did they never think about defending their comrades' honor? However, he couldn't blame his comrades either, as no one would have thought that he would be reincarnated with the memories of his previous life. He's Hamel who died 300 years ago. He's currently reincarnated as a descendant of the hero Vermouth. Eugene Lionheart, 13 years old. Eugene is practicing while thinking that Vermouth have more concubines than his legal wives. Eugene recalls, Vermouth wasn't the type of man to think about women before, but that seems to have changed when he aged. That's understandable actually, because he's the only ordinary human there in family tree. The only direct family member is recognized as his lineage or descendants of his main wife, while additional lineages are not recognized. Eugene also has the surname Lionheart, but he comes from an additional bloodline. Before the bloodline succession ceremony was held, additional descendants were forbidden from wielding real swords or forbidden from practicing mana. That was the reason why Eugene could only practice using a wooden sword, but he was sure that it would end that one day. Eugene practiced as hard as he could to become great. So that every time he practiced on the doll, his dolls was always destroyed. Eugene always complained about it to his father, so His father was confused about it, especially when his father saw Eugene's body that is still 13 years old, so muscular and strong that he thought he would lose if he fought Eugene hand-to-hand combat. Eugene was indeed his son, but sometimes he frightened his father with his strength, as if there was an error that was not childlike. A glare that conveyed no naivete at all. Even though he lost his mother when he was young, he does not grieve for it. Meanwhile, after successfully destroying his practice dolls, Eugene grumbles. He says that it's because of their trash blacksmiths. Moreover, the main family is not like the auxiliary family. They could practice using real swords and also develop their mana. They would just stop the auxiliary bloodline's attempts to usurp the main bloodline position. Since they were young, the father thought that Eugene had extraordinary talent. So great, that he doubted whether he was his child or not, if Eugene had been born in the main bloodline, or rather, if Eugene hadn't been as gifted as his father, Eugene probably wouldn't have heard from the discrepancy between his extraordinary talent and reality. Meanwhile, the father then warned about the bloodline succession ceremony, which would be held tomorrow. The bloodline succession ceremony itself is a tradition held every 10 years in the Lionheart family. At the event from both bloodlines, all children between the ages of 10 and 15 gather at the main residence. And they look to see who deserved to be called Lionheart. After that, Eugene left his house. Eugene went by horse carriage for the main residence. Then he is thinking that in his previous life, as Hamel, he was a genius. Since childhood, he never had a problem learning new things and his growth was faster than others. However, he was not a real genius, being an expert in swordsmanship and magic. He is called the god of war and the master of all. He is the great Vermouth. He was descended from a duke and his imperial house of Kiel until he eventually gave up his title. He was worshipped as a hero until the end of his life. While the others, the Ytmanhwa, the mischievous girl, was invited to the magic kingdom of Arot and was chosen as the youngest head witch of the magic tower. The faithful Anis, the rotten heart, was also called saints in the Holy Empire of Eurus. There are even some holy books that were written based on the teachings that still exist today. The brave moron, I can't believe that idiot ended up creating his empire on his own name. Eugene heard that in the end everyone can live in prosperity. However, why is the demon lord still alive and well, even though they all promised to defeat the demon kings? Then why a promise made by Vermouth, with the demon lord of incarceration after his death, and with that promise the war against the demon king ended and the world became peaceful, and that peace continues today, 300 years later. Then, Sir Gordon, who saw Eugene was silent, said that he was a little nervous. He thought that if Eugene was nervous, it would be very difficult for him to stay in the main residence. Then after several chats, that made Eugene even more dislikes Sir Gordon. And finally, they arrived at the main residence of the Lionheart family. Arriving at the main family's residence, there was no definite greeting for Eugene, who was from an additional family. Eugene and Sir Gordon passed through the entrance along the way with many flagpoles representing Vermouth's Lionheart. Eugene felt a little sad to see that, because the only ones who could wear the lion emblem on their chests, the direct descendants of Lionheart. After that, Eugene asks about others' brothers, who according to Sir Gordon still hasn't arrived in. Eugene is the first to arrive. He then led to Eugene toward the living room. A maid, her name is Nina, greeted Eugene and said that she would serve Eugene there. That was pretty good for Eugene because they also provided him with a personal butler. Eugene gets acquainted with the maid, who turns out to be 16 years old, seeing that Eugene thinks cunningly about their plan that plans to scold him. If he scolds her for a small mistake, it seemed they like to bother him. Then Eugene asks the maid about when his siblings are coming there. According to the maid, they will come in 4 days. Then he asks to show him the training ground. Meanwhile, a boy and a girl are discussing Eugene, the son of an additional family who is the same age as them. They heard Eugene was from a place far from the western part of the empire. They continued to taunt Eugene, who must only know how to work with a pitchfork and came with a cart that reeks of cow dung. Then after that, They were about to go to where Eugene was. Meanwhile, a child was watching from the window of the room, about in different places. The girl glare with fierce eye, the boy immediately hide. Eugene trained diligently, he was never lazy about training, even once in his previous life as Hamel. But after being reincarnated, he always trained his body to the extreme level. No matter how hard the training was, his body could adapt well, besides minor wounds heal quickly. Moreover, the body of the Vermouth descendant was extraordinary, more so than he had imagined. Meanwhile, the maid who saw the Eugene couldn't believe it because it was so extraordinary. She couldn't believe that Eugene could move like that, even though he had a sandbag bind in his hand and a spear. Eugene, who was practicing, suddenly a voice asked, "What is he doing?" When Nina saw them, she trembled with fear. It turned out that the two people were young Master Cyan and Miss Seal, who felt that his question had not been answered, asked again what Eugene was doing. Eugene stopped his practice, and answered that question with another question that he was practicing using a spear, after which it ended with the sentence of "idiot." Seal provoked Cyan. She said that according to him, Eugene, a country boy, had just called Cyan an idiot. Cyan, who heard that, was immediately angry and shouted. He forced Eugene to into an apologize for the insulted done. Then Eugene said sorry briefly. Cyan, suddenly dumbfounded, knew that it wasn't serious, then asked Eugene to lower his head and sincerely apologize. Eugene replies that he isn't the same age as him. He thinks they can become friends. Why should he bow his head to Cyan? However, Cyan still refuses to be friends with people like him, because being a Lionheart doesn't mean they can be friends. Seal reminded Cyan about the carriage, which made Cyan immediately asked Eugene to clean the carriage that brought him to that place. He was sure that the cart must smell of cow dung. Hearing what Cyan said, Eugene asked to the maid to clean the cart that brought him here. Cyan didn't accept what Eugene said, because he told Eugene to clean his cart. But instead Eugene ordered his maid, especially since he was still there. Cyan asks Eugene, "Did you ignore his orders? I'm Cyan Lionheart." Eugene doesn't seem to care about Cyan anger. He instead introduces himself that he is Eugene Lionheart. Nice to meet him. After that, Seal introduced herself as Seal Lionheart. Angry Cyan had no intention of becoming familiar with Eugene. He ignored his orders and also insult him. Cyan then picks up a wooden sword to challenge Eugene into a one-on-one duel. Then angry Cyan invites Eugene into a duel. Eugene can only smirk. Then he says that Cyan can't say a duel that easily. Then told Cyan stop bothering him and asked him to leave them. Hearing what Eugene said, not want to apologize to. Cyan screams and says if he doesn't want to do this, he doesn't want to do that, because Eugene going to keep running away. It seems his parents didn't teach him what honor is. Hearing Cyan continue to grumble, Eugene took off his sand glove. Seeing that, Cyan was surprised and asked what that was. After that, Eugene throws his heavy coat, which made Cyan even more disbelieving about it. It turns out that all this time Eugene has been practicing with weights. Cyan thought it was just a decoration to make him look cool, but how else was he? The one who insisted on having a duel. If he resigns, Seal will make fun of me for the rest of his life. If he wants to get honor again, he must punish him. Cyan said emphatically that he was inviting Eugene to a duel. Eugene accepted. Then Cyan put out a handkerchief. After drops of handkerchief, duel is start, with one very quick and precise strike with his spear, which hit Cyan's stomach. Cyan falls, and loses. Seeing this, Seal was shocked and didn't know what to do. Eugene admits to himself that he won the duel. Seal approached his brother and assured him that he was fine. Without having time to answer, Cyan instead vomited silent and looked at Eugene with a look of disapproval. Seal said that it was unfair. The duel just now was very dishonorable. Buzz, Eugene asked, "What's unfair?" The duel started. As soon as he threw his handkerchief, it was the fault of a reckless person. Then Seal accused Eugene of using mana, but Eugene refused and said that additional bloodlines could not train mana before the main bloodline succession ritual. Seal couldn't believe it and still accused Eugene, if he lied. How could you swing his spear while wearing weight without using mana? He said that Cyan didn't just teach one-sidedly. As soon as he was hit, he immediately jumped back and reduced the impact. They shouldn't have a real experience, simply amazing. Then Eugene said that if he calculates the possibility of his development, there is still a chance. Even though he is quite trash, but he is a descendant of Vermouth. Xian tried to stand up and said that Eugene's attack was cunning. Eugene countered that by saying, that if Cyan was indeed a noble descendant of the main line of the Lionheart bloodline, he should humbly accept his defeat. However, it seemed like Eugene had to hold back. Because he had made Cyan like that, difficult situation would happen to him. After that a servant from Cyan came in a hurry. Eugene sees no lion badge on his chest, which means he is a knight from the main family, and it seems that the man's abilities are quite good. Cyan had a sad face and called the knight Hazer that he lost to Eugene, whom he calls a country boy. He admits that he was the one who pressed for a duel, but he loses instead. Hearing this, Hazer then introduced himself that he was assigned to serve Master Cyan. Eugene is also a descendant of Lionheart from the province Gidal. Hazer immediately guesses that Sergihard is their head, which turns out to be Eugene's father. Hazer asks Eugene to explain everything that happened. Eugene then says that he was provoked by him into a duel and also insulting his father. Xian does not accept Eugene's words because he feels he has never said that. Eugene reply with a question, didn't he learn what honor is from his father, and also called Eugene loser? According to Eugene, not only did Cyan insult him, but he also insulted his father, and then asked Hazer if there was a reason why he shouldn't have accepted the duel. Hazer replied that the reason was acceptable. Sure that he invites Cyan treat his wound. Then tells Eugene that they will meet next time. Seal waved as well. After that Eugene enjoyed his food, which was quite a lot. Not long after, Nina came. Eugene asked what she found. Nina replied that tomorrow afternoon, young Master Decan, Hansen, and Jules were expected to arrive in the afternoon. Young Master Gargis and Miss Desiro would come through the warp gate. Hearing that, Eugene thought that they all came sooner than expected. It was the start of the succession of the bloodline. After a while Eugene came out and stood facing the main residence building. He said that from now on he would mess with descendants of Vermouth. However, Eugene says that hope you shouldn't be disappointed, but that doesn't mean he's willing to become one of his descendants. Hazer, Cyan, and Seal entered a room where there was the second wife from the main bloodline, that was none other than Cyan and Seal's mother, CatZilla. Hazer tells CatZilla that Cyan lost a duel to a child of the indirect bloodline. Hearing that, CatZilla called Cyan to come closer to her. After Cyan was nearby, CatZilla stabbed Cyan's chest with a blunt object, which means Cyan feel pain, but CatZilla didn't care and kept asking about what happened. And then Anicilia asked Hazer wasn't he sure that he had never practiced how to use mana. Hazer replied that it was true that Eugene had no traces of mana in his body. Then she called Seal and asked what caused Cyan defeat. Seal said that at the start of the fight, Eugene thrust his spear. Cyan was shocked and tried to back away, but Eugene's spear was faster than his brother's, and CatZilla understood that the fight was over in one strike. Cyan called his mother, and CatZilla slapped him instead, and shouted at Cyan how he dare challenge someone and lose in front of those lowly people. Not only that, but losing against a brat who had no mana. His father was coming back from the bloodline succession ritual. What should CatZilla tell him? Later, hearing that Cyan apologized, and he was really sorry for his defeat, and CatZilla then called Hazer and said that now she would have killed you with her own hands, but he was her husband's favorite bodyguard. Therefore, she asked to train Cyan so he would not embarrass her again. Azar nodded, then lead Cyan to walk away from there. Now, there is only CatZilla and Seal, and CatZilla that asks Seal to continue to be close to Eugene because the boy is strong enough that he can beat Cyan. Even though CatZilla wants Eugene to be killed now, she will become the main suspect later, and in the Lionheart family, if there is a murder, the guardians of the family code will be deployed, and CatZilla really didn't want that to happen. CatZilla said that getting along with Eugene was pretty good, while Seal agreed and also wanted to know more about Eugene. She would be friends with Eugene. The next day of the three inheritors of the auxiliary bloodline arrived: Deacon, Hansen, and Jules. Nina calls out to Eugene, who is still training. Nina says that an additional 3 family sons has arrived. Besides that, Nina also said that the family head of Lionheart was also there. Nina then gave a change of clothes to Eugene, for him to quickly do the welcoming. Even though she knew that Eugene would arrive later than the others. Soon Eugene lined up with other additional bloodlines, to welcome the head of the Lionheart family. Meanwhile, Eugene saw a woman standing beside Cyan and Seal, namely CatZilla, the second wife, and the person in front of him was the first wife, Theanese, and beside him was the first son of the main family, and also the first direct successor. That was Iode Lionheart. Soon, Gaillard Lionheart and his brother Cyan arrived. Gaillard then approached Iode and told him that he had grown up and asked if his abilities had grown too. Iode said that he did his best to live up to his father's expectation. After that, Gaillard greeted Seal and Cyan, who then said that they miss their father. Then he greeting with his brother and his newly born child of the Lionheart family, and last he greeting with children from additional families. Gaillard have been invited them to eat tonight and discuss about blood succession ritual there. A big dining table are ready, one side main family and other side branch family are waiting for meal. Eugene looked at Garges and Desira, the 2 people who came through warp gates, where they are from the 2 families that were considered the best of all the families of the reserve line. Then Eugene thinks who the foreigners were there. Wasn't the banquet for the families and their children participating? Seal was also curious, asked his father about it. Gaillard had wanted to introduce the man later but had to be forced into it sooner. Then, the stranger introduced himself as Reborn from the Red Tower. Hearing Reborn name, everyone there was shocked, while Eugene vomited his coffee and almost choked. Reborn asked Eugene if he was okay. Eugene replied that there was no problem. Eugene then thinks that if he's from the Red Tower it means he's Sinya's student, or rather he's a student of Sinya's student. 300 years ago, Sinya managed to become the Tower Master of the Green Tower, and she was the youngest master in the history of Arot. She completely overhauled the magic books on Arot, and she continues to accompany and teach students from other towers too. Even the Tower Masters are also taught by her. So, Tower Masters from Green and Red Towers still consider Sinya the Wise as the Great Master. Eugene didn't expect that he would meet someone related to his old friend here, as Eugene thinks that. Gaillard then talks to Eugene. Gaillard says that he has heard from Theanese that his son insulted Eugene and his father. Eugene says, yes, but he doesn't hold a grudge at all. Gaillard asks if it's because he won. Eugene protested and said losing, he would be like that too. If he was that weak and couldn't defend his dignity, then he would definitely hold back the shame. Gaillard later tells Cyan that he is not ashamed of his defeat, but that he is disappointed that the duel started with Cyan insult, but he does not apologize to Eugene. Even after the duel even loss, Cyan inflates the name Lionheart and the great Vermouth is his ancestor. If he is main blood, then he'd better learn to respect himself and also his opponent. Cyan apologizes even though Eugene knows that, he knows that it was insincere and comes across as forced. Gaillard says that if Eugene's father is Jihad, he cannot say that he knows his father, but Eugene understands that he lives in an unknown land. Then Gaillard asked if his father taught all that. Eugene replied that his father taught the basic and the rest he learned himself. Hearing that answer to Desira and Garges couldn't believe that Eugene was practicing without anyone teaching him, and that he could beat Cyan at that level. After that, the servants brought delicious food there. Then they enjoyed the dishes that were available there, and after enjoying the food, Gaillard said again, that the reason he prepared the banquet that day was to explain the details of the blood succession ritual to them. Gaillard knows this sounds strange, but he believes that the traditional method of ritual is very easy. The ritual benefited the main bloodline children more than branch family. The main lines and the additional lines mean nothing. Eugene thinks that the Vermouth descendant is more generous than him. That's why, for the fairness of the ritual, This time Gillard asked for external help, which was none other than the Robrines. Then with Robrine's magic power, he made a holographic labyrinth map on the table. He said for the ritual later, you will walk through the labyrinth. He made all will pass through different gates and defeat the boss monster in the middle. Of course, they have to go through various obstacles, traps, and battles before getting there. However, all the events in the labyrinth were illusions that he created with magic. They could have thought it was all real, but it was all fake, like an action-packed adventure. Eugene thought that Robrian didn't only use summoning magic but high-level illusionary control magic as well. Tower Masters really should be able to do that. Robrian continued his words, if one of them 9 defeats the main monster, the ritual is over. They will all earn points based on contributions. Then Eugene asked what if they beat the main monster? What's the reward? Gillard now replied that, they could take 1 treasure from the family treasure vault. Hearing that, Eugene was very interested to hear the gift. After all the banquets and talk, they returned to their respective places as well as Eugene. While in the hall to his place, he had thought arrogantly that he was sure he would win the fight and thought about what prize he would take from the treasury. However, his step suddenly stopped when to say Gargis intercepted him. Gargis then asked Eugene, if it was true that he had won the duel against Scion Lionheart. Eugene said briefly that it was true. After having no other questions, he walked away from there. Gargis had tried to hold Eugene, but Eugene didn't care, and walking as the night wore on, then he going to practicing. Eugene continued to practice very hard. Desira and Gargis wants practice with him. Desira carried 2 spears in her hands. Gargis stepped forward and stood in front of Eugene, then opened his shirt and revealed his body, full of big muscles. Eugene looked at him. Confused, Gargis proudly said that Eugene was allowed to touch him. He said that if his family had a secret medicine for growing muscles, that could accelerate muscle growth. Apart from that, there were no side effects. So he asked Eugene if he was interested. Eugene didn't answer, but instead asked if Gargis had come to sell him potion. Desira came closer and said that it was impossible for the drug to have no side effects. Whether he was a man or a woman, if he used the medicine, he would have a beard. The Desira said to Eugene that she heard that Eugene fought with Xian, using a spear. Then why was he practicing using a wooden sword? Eugene replies that he uses both a sword and a spear. After hearing that answer, Desira throw a spear to Eugene. Eugene accepts it. Then Desira says that she has n spears and invites Eugene to duel using spears. But then Eugene accepted the offer because it seemed easier to fight him than against the muscular man. Eugene was also curious about the abilities of the supreme children of the main bloodline, and then the fight started. But Gargis was the referee. He said that, even if it was just the duel, it had to be fair. Gargis' behavior reminded Eugene of a fool. He knew, or indeed a descendant of Moron, started the duel. Even Desira didn't believe that Eugene could use a sword and spear, and then Desira intended to show Eugene that, experiments, spear was not easy and Eugene can do it without being serious. After Gargis' starting signal, Desira took the initiative to attack and was certain that she would win the duel. However, then Desira stopped because she felt that there was no gap at all. Eugene asked about it. Then Desira tried to attack again, but each of her attacks was easily parried and countered by Eugene. Eugene praised and said that Desira is very strong even without mana. With her development now she has good potential, but it is not yet his opponent. Desira is annoyed with Eugene because all of his attacks can be easily parried without moving at all. However, Eugene's arrogance will be the beginning of his defeat according to Desira. Desira continued to attack him from every side looking for gaps, until she found one gap that Eugene might not have been able to block, mainly his feet. However, Desira's thoughts were wrong when she was about to hit Eugene's leg. Instead, Eugene steps on Desira's spearhead. Desira was surprised and kept trying to pull her spear, while Eugene had already pointed his spear to Desira. Gargis has signaled the end of the duel and said that the match was won by Eugene Lionheart.